The story of the United States regarding Latin America has always been very violent, full of financing wars, occupations, and political interventions. This began with the Spanish American War, when in 1898 the United States decided that intervening in the war for the independence of Cuba would benefit their economic interests. After the defeat, Spain signed the Treaty of Paris, which gave Cuba, Philippines, and the one colonies to the United States. The Banana Wars began after the Treaty of Paris. The United States proceeded to conduct military interventions in Cuba, Panama, Honduras, Nicaragua, Mexico, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. They sent Marines to create a company called United Fruit Company, with the only purpose of having a monopoly in the banana market. This caused the death of many of the Latin American workers who refused to help. The United States also supported a revolution that made Panama independent of Colombia to get control of the Panamanian Canal, and got involved in the Mexican Revolution in 1910, worried about their own commercial interests after having invested in Mexican mines and trains. These interventions include the assassination of the president Francisco Madero and the occupation of Veracruz. In 1929, the Great Depression began in the USA, following the crash of the New York Stock Exchange, and spread quickly to almost all the countries in the world. The effects were devastating nearly in all of them. The election of Franklin D. Roosevelt as president in 1932 and the establishment of the New Deal marked the beginning of the end of the Great Depression in the United States. He also proclaimed the Good Neighbor policy, which stated that the president was determined to foster better ties with the countries of Central and South America. Under his direction, the USA placed more emphasis on trade and cooperation than using violence to maintain the hemispheric stability.
In the field of world policy, I would dedicate this nation to the policy of the good neighbor, the neighbor who resolutely respects himself and, because he does so, respects the rights of others, the neighbor who respects his obligations and respects the sanctity of agreements in and with a world of neighbors.
For this purpose, it was needed to have a change in the USA socially and culturally, by reducing the prejudice towards Latin America. This intention to change the population mentality is shown in some Disney movies of the time. In World War II, the Northern America State Department launched a number of initiatives intended to counterattack Hitler's growing influence in the continent's lower half. It was noted how well liked the Disney animated characters were. The idea then occurred to name Walt Disney as ambassador, giving him the responsibility of leading a few long-distance voyages set in countries with great geostrategic interests, like Mexico or Brazil. This is how Saludos Amigos, a los Tres Caballeros were born. Saludos Amigos is an animated film by Walt Disney Pictures, released in 1942, at the beginning of the war, and it combines both live action and animation. It shows the trip of certain Disney creators to Latin America in order to learn about their culture and gain some inspiration. We can see later some animated short stories, one that tells the story of Donald the Duck in Lake Titicaca, another about a plane that crosses the Andes from Chile to Argentina, a tier one with Goofy as an Argentine gaucho, and finally one set in Rio de Janeiro, where Donald befriends a parrot, emblematic bird of Brazil. The intention of these short films was to bring audience closer to improve the relationship between them. For instance, the short film about the Argentine gaucho compares with the American cowboy, showing similarities in the countries to give the audience a sense of familiarity. They also try to teach the North American audience the Latino culture, such as their dances, food, and costumes. These stories show for the first time territories that had never before appeared in major film productions, which attracted great tourist interest. However, it also promoted a series of stereotypes, forgetting about their cultural diversity of Latin American countries. On the other hand, Los Tres Caballeros was made in 1944 and also it features the same style as the previous one. It is also an adventure set in several regions of Latin America. Pancho Pistolas made his film debut in this one, showing up at Donald's birthday to celebrate with him and Jose Carioca, and educating them and the audience greatly about Mexican culture. He's from Guadalajara and he's portraying a song with youth celebration just as much as Jose Carioca does. His clothes are characterized by the use of the typical Mexican suit, hat, and a pair of discharging pistols. Jose Carioca is another friend of Donald in this film. It also appears here. The smoking power from Saludos Amigos, it represents Brazil and was created during the Second War through the Good Neighbor policy to enforce the cooperation of Brazil. However, this film is different from its predecessor, being published at the end of the war, and with the United States in a favorable position. There was not so much need for the image of a good neighbor. The film includes the representation of the local music and dances. One of the most commented aspects of this film is the sexualization of Latin women. One of the things Jose Carioca tells Donald when suggesting going to Bahia, it is that the women there are very beautiful. During the trips, it looks like Donald is only interested in the women, following and looking at everyone he crosses, and he doesn't care that much about the country's culture. Several Latin actors appear such as Aurora Miranda, Dora Luz, or Carmen Molina. To conclude, while the initial intention of creating these movies was to end some stereotypes about Latin America, but end up relying on these stereotypes and promoting others, representing the population of these countries as uncivilized and sexualizing the women that live there. These movies popularized some Latin American countries, but clearly representing them as inferior to the United States. Despite a series of tributes, phrases, and sequences that, although the intention is good, do not stop seeming more like racist parodies than the inclusion of thanks to Alice for World War II. Besides the bad representation that the Latinos have, it is also important to mention how sometimes media and politics can be mixed, as there has been numerous examples of this happening all over the years, such as Rocky IV during the Cold War. As a spectator, we should be very critical of what we are watching to make sure that we are seeing is not part of a political agenda, or do our research about the true story behind it.